Hey there, it's Mark from Max Q with another update on the Cub project. First though, we're going to come over here and we're going to plug my little Cub hat. So you can get this hat at this web address. I actually made that graphic. I had the patches made and then I put them on the hats. So if you like it, hey, check them out, fetch one up. So got a variety of things to go over here now that we're a little over a month into this project, restoring a 46 Cub. But the exciting thing that I did over the weekend was I fetched up this really cool vintage lathe. I mentioned in the previous video that a friend over in Illinois, Steve, was gonna let me have this thing. He's had it for years, and I've known him since the mid-70s. He actually bought a BD5 kit that my dad had originally bought. My dad got in on the BD5 thing real early, but then didn't actually get any work done on the kit. And so anyway, we've known Steve from a sport aviation perspective for years and years, and he's letting me use this lathe, which again, in the previous video I showed how this piece of chrome moly tubing here, I'm going to make some inserts for doing some fuselage repairs. You can see the fuselage in the spray booth over there. Some aft fuselage tubing needs to be repaired. So when you patch, you need a sleeve to put on the inside. This is 3/4 the same size as the longerons. I need to turn it down a little bit so it'll slip fit on the inside. It's 120 thousandths wall, so it'll leave enough wall after it's been turned down. Now, I don't know that I'm going to be able to turn it down at this length. This tailstock does have a bearing in here and centers it up, but I'm not sure if that's because I haven't done anything with a lathe since like 1979 when I was in high school. I think I got an A in that class though, and I really enjoyed working with the lathe. But this one's especially cool. Well, it's kind of neat because it's got the Sears Craftsman brand on it. It's built by Atlas, and I think from what I can tell so far, this is actually from the 1940s. Which to me is just really cool. And of course that fits really good with Betty back here working on the radial engine. So I'm just pretty darn excited, and I've got it set up enough to where it'll run. So I'm just gonna show, we flip the switch and the motors are running and it seems to be pretty quiet. And then we can engage things and it's nice and quiet. And doggone it if it doesn't turn. So that's pretty darn awesome. Now I admit that, again, because it's been quite a long time, I've got to do some thinking to understand, or some research and understand how the tool should be properly positioned. And I'm going to be moving forward extremely cautiously with this. But this will be a fun project to see if both me and this machine can turn this piece of chrome moly down just a little bit so I can use it for this project. Otherwise, I don't have like a long list of things that I would like to do with this lathe. But it just seems like it'd be a really awesome thing to be able to occasionally create some unique parts that you just can't hardly do without a lathe. So anyway, pretty excited about that. It's I can't think of anything else to mention about it, but if you know anything about these lathes, like, I guess I've done some research online, and it's obviously fairly lightweight. And I think even some of the things I've seen is that, you know, you can't go hogging metal off or the whole thing kind of gets, you know, bent out of shape a little bit. It's flexible. But, you know, for cautious and lightweight work, seems like it might do pretty darn well. And I love the look of it. So anyway, that's that. Now let's take a look over here at the wings, because I have made some decent progress here. I've got quite a few of the steel parts, like out here, the wingtip bow attach fittings. They've been blasted and painted, and new hardware put in there to get that rolling. One compression strut out here is back in place. All the parts have been blasted, new hardware there. And then the big strut in the middle where the struts attach, it's all blasted and painted. I just haven't got it back in yet. Part of the reason there actually is because the strut attach fittings that layer up in this area with the spacers and with the hardware that goes into the sort of the in strut there, the strut attach fittings had a fair amount of pitting on them, so I actually have acquired brand new fittings, FAA PMA from Dakota Cub, for both the front and rear spar for both wings. So strut attached fittings will be brand new. And most of the hardware, in fact, I think all the hardware in the main part of the wing, I am replacing. A few of the pieces out here where this compression strut goes, which is outside of the fabric covering, so you see it, I'm going to use the old original Piper Cub stamped bolts there. So when you pull the wing root fairings off, you'll actually be able to see those cool bolts. But all the other bolts, I think I am replacing, unless for some reason it would make sense to leave it in. So with the compression struts blasted and painted, it won't be long here when I get them all in, then I'll be able to start putting the diagonal brace wires back in. And that'll be, again, sort of a tutorial there on the process of tightening all that up. And then also, well, I guess I can show like this pulley bracket here for the aileron. That's been blasted in new hardware. And the pulley, it's the original pulley that was at least on the airplane when I got it here. Cleaned that all up, and I think that's going to work out pretty well. The jury strut fittings, so this is the back side. There's you can actually see the jury strut fitting for the front strut over there. So that stuff's all cleaned up. And some general cleanup on the spars. I'm not quite done with that. Oh, I've also got all the aileron hinges removed. I drilled the rivets out that hold the aileron hinge into this area here. And a little more cleanup to do. It's got, it's not the prettiest looking in there, but it's certainly not the worst looking in there. I think it's all going to clean up just fine. There may be some issues with the aileron hinges themselves though, which is common, that there can be a fair amount of corrosion where the hinge exits the wing and is exposed to the weather and traps a lot of moisture. I've blasted one of those and it's a little questionable, and so I need to blast the other two. Might wind up having to either do a repair or replace of those. That's still yet to be determined. But otherwise, there's been a lot of getting my head into the game, because when I did the Super Cub back in 2017, it was a 1959, so it's quite a bit newer aircraft, and then also it was in remarkably good shape. It had less than 2,000 hours total time, or I guess right at 2,000 hours. So the wings were in super clean shape. And so it just required a little bit of cleanup, some new leading edges, new wingtip bows. But I didn't have to dive into any of the compression struts or the drag wires or the hinges. And of course it had flaps here. But all the hinges were in fine shape on it. So this has been a deeper process, and it's interesting that you know, it doesn't look like there's much there, but there's a lot of parts, a lot of hardware, and a lot of procedural things that all go together with this. And while I understand all the basics of that for sure, it's not something I've worked with in great detail on a Piper Cub. So it's been a process of research and caution, because obviously there's a lot of stuff here you want to do. I should say, everything you do, you want to do it right, and there's a lot of opportunity for doing things incorrectly. So that's why even down here, these containers, I've had each bay, when I've pulled a compression strut out, all the parts have stayed together. So I've done the blasting sort of in stages, blast and paint, so that I can keep the parts together. Now, if this was the third or fourth Cub wing that I'd worked on, I'd know so much more about all those parts that I wouldn't, because there isn't a tremendous amount of commonality, but there are a few parts that are different that have to go in a specific spot. So with that in mind, if you're really, really super familiar with all these parts, it's not that big a deal. But I'm just trying to make sure, as I'm learning a little bit more specifically about the details of an actual J-3 as opposed to that Super Cub. And again, I didn't take the Super Cub that far apart. So anyway, I'm hoping yet this week to get over to Clyde Smith in Pennsylvania and pick up the new tip bows, which I'm also going to be getting a firewall from him. So now that I've got this, I also straightened this diagonal support, because it had been, because this wingtip bow had been impacted at some point in time and had a steel support out here. It was actually broken in two. And when it did, it bent that, but nobody straightened that at some point in the past. So that's straightened up. And I think the wings are going to look pretty darn sweet, actually. Of course, you never see all that once the fabric's on. But then, of course, the leading edges. So I've got the metal laid out here, the first batch of metal that I'm going to use for making the leading edges. And so I'm going to get to cutting on that real soon and get those bent in the little jig that I showed in a previous video that makes the work pretty simple. So hopefully that all goes real smooth. So it won't take too much longer here before I'll have this wing done. And then the things that I've learned getting my head wrapped around the details of the J-3 wing are going to make this wing over here go, I think, remarkably fast by comparison. Be able to slide right on through that, feeling pretty comfortable with what goes where. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else here specifically of great interest. I can't think of anything, but I did have a bunch of pictures that I wanted to share from back in 2012 at Hartford, Wisconsin. There was the 75th anniversary of the Piper Cub. So there was a big gathering there right before Oshkosh, the weekend right before Oshkosh. So here are several pictures that I took. I used to run airpigz, AIRPIGZ.com. It's actually still up, but I haven't been posting on it for years. And so I actually covered that event, the 75th anniversary of the Cubs, and put quite a few posts up on airpigz related to that. So I took these pictures because it was just an incredible couple of days there with all that Cub yellow, and of course a few airplanes that weren't yellow in the batch. But it really, it just exemplified the simplistic beauty of what the Piper Cub is and the joy that those airplanes can bring to people. It was very dry that year, so you can see that the grounds, the grass is pretty dry, but it was a great turnout. Had a lot of fun. I went for a ride while I was there and got this picture from above, which is pretty cool because when I put this on airpigz, I'm pretty sure this is the same picture that I put on airpigz. And if you do the counting, there are actually 75 Cubs, just by chance, 75 Cubs are visible in this picture, which is pretty cool because it was the 75th anniversary. And with that in mind, obviously some aircraft left early, some arrived late, some aren't in the picture because they're out flying. So I don't really know how many airplanes were there, but I'm guessing it was pretty darn close to 100 Cubs altogether. And I don't know if there's a plan for anything coming up, like maybe for the 90th. Obviously something's going to happen somewhere for the 100th, probably at Lock Haven, hopefully. But it was just an amazing event, and the weather was fantastic. And then it was pretty cool because these airplanes, if I remember correctly, I think it was Sunday morning, maybe it was Monday morning, but it was Monday morning that they en masse flew up to Oshkosh. So there was a mass arrival of J-3 Cubs early in the morning, and I had already gotten up to Oshkosh at that point, so I was able to see, I don't think I really got pictures of the airplanes arriving, but it was pretty cool to see them then take up a huge part of the vintage aircraft parking up at Oshkosh then for that week. So anyway, it's just a wonderful airplane. If you know, most likely you know the Cub and you already love the Cub. If you don't, there's just something about it. I don't know, for me, I always assume it has to do with the door being able to open for flight so simply. And I absolutely love the cylinders hanging out in the breeze. And just the general shape of the airplane is fantastic. And I guess maybe the iconic yellow that is typically what you see a Cub in, whereas many of the other aircraft from the era rapidly in the years after their initial heyday, they wound up getting painted all kinds of colors. But for some reason, the Cub just really latched on to its yellow heritage. and I think that helps to create that more iconic image even further. But they are just a remarkable airplane. They're such a joy to fly. They're a great airplane for exposing other people to low and slow flying. And so I'm just really thrilled to be able to be here doing some restoration work on this J-3. And it won't be too much longer before we'll start getting to the point where we can do some fabric work and it'll start looking like an airplane. And eventually we'll be spraying some yellow paint all over everything. So I'm looking forward to that. Thanks for following along, and we'll see you next week.